reading today comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 23. We'll be reading verses 1 through 25. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king. And Pilate asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him, You have said so. Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, I find no guilt in this man. But they were urgent, saying, He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea from Galilee even to this place. When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at the time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he long desired to see him, because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So he questioned him at some length, but he made no answer. The chief priests and scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. And Herod, with his soldiers, treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, sent him back to Pilate. And Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before this they had been at enmity with each other. Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and said to them, You brought me this man as one who was misleading the people, and after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him. Now he was obliged to release one man to them at the festival. But they cried out together, Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder. Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, Crucify! Crucify him! A third time he said to them, Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him. But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. The trials of Jesus are a puzzling collection of mishandling of justice on all levels. The lies, the false testimonies, and the jurisdictional problems all scream of a mistrial. Yet there was not one who would speak up for Jesus and set the record straight. All of the friends, all those healed, all those who were forgiven, all those who were enlightened by this most extraordinary of men would not utter a peep to save the King of Kings. The only attempt made was by Pilate himself, who repeatedly said, I find no guilt in this man. In all, Jesus suffered 6 trials, 3 at the hands of Jewish leaders, 3 before Roman officials, 2 before Pilate, 1 before Herod. The first is before Annas, the former high priest. We find in John 18:12-13. So the Roman cohort and the commander and the officers of the Jews arrest Jesus and bound him and led him to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. The second was before Caiaphas, the current high priest, as we find in Matthew 26:57. And those who had seized Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and elders were gathered together. The third is before the Sanhedrin. In Luke 22:66 we find, And when it was day, the council of elders and the people assembled, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council chamber. The fourth is before Pilate. In John 18:28 we find, They led Jesus, therefore, from Caiaphas in the praetorium, and it was early, and they themselves did not enter into the praetorium, in order that they might not be defiled, but might eat the Passover. The fifth was before Herod, but when Pilate heard it, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself was in Jerusalem at the time. Luke 23:6-7. The sixth and final trial was back before Pilate. We find in Luke 23:11. And Herod and his soldiers, after treating him with contempt and mocking him, dressed him in a gorgeous robe and sent him back to Pilate. Our question of the day: have you ever considered the trial in light of Isaiah 53? And a thought to meditate on this day: The psalmist declares, upon considering all the wonders of God's creation, why he takes such care for us, even more so when we consider the actions of man towards his only Son. And those are our thoughts for today, May 3rd.